We're so happy to have you with us and build on your experience that has almost 1 decade of talking about the subject, now more into private investments, inshallah. Mufti Faraz, if we want to touch on a very basic question, which is how do you define zakat and why is there zakat to start with from an Islamic perspective?
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's a very important question for all of us when it comes to Ramadan, that when we are paying zakat, we understand what we are actually doing. Zakat is not just a payment or an expense that you're making and it's booked on your income statement. Right? Don't see zakat as another expense. Zakat is your what we like to describe as your membership fee for Islam. Right? It's what brings you a part of the faith. We have your salah, we have your zakah. This is your membership fee to be recognized as a Muslim, to be part of this team. There's this payment that you're making, right? If you're eligible to pay, you have to make this payment. So it gives you some form of identity. Salah gives you identity. Fasting gives you identity. Hajj gives you identity. Zakat gives you identity also. It's a financial form of identity. And of course, that's at an individual level. At an economic level, zakat does so many things, right? It's a stimulus for the economy. It empowers people because Islam has a vision for people building. Islam is there to build people uh, spiritually as well as economically, because they can only be sustained spiritually if they are also economically sustained and economically stable. That's why the hadith tells us قَادَ الْفَقْرُ أَيَكُونَ كُفْرًا, that poverty can lead to disbelief. And the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would make dua against faqr. He would say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-faqri wal-kufr. So it's zakat plays many important roles in a believer's life, and that's why we have zakat as a an amazing worship from a financial perspective.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Mufti. And when we talk about one's duty to pay his zakat, when should he do it as an individual?
Yeah, look, everybody should have a date in the year on which they calculate their assets, what they have, right? Like how we have financial year end for our taxes, we have a zakat year end for our zakat. So most people pay in Ramadan, right? They pay maybe the first of Ramadan, some pay the 27th of Ramadan, 29th of Ramadan, whichever date that you pay on, use that date annually and then work out your cash, your gold, your silver, any stock, business items that you have. And that should be the time when you calculate. And if you have investments, that's when you consider your investments also.
Of course. And Mufti, we always get this question about people who are paying tax in jurisdictions that pay income tax or they pay tax as well on the profit of their companies or their investments. And they always ask, so I'm paying tax, should I pay zakat as well? Is it the same? Should I deduct my tax? How do you go about answering this question?
Yeah, look, if there's some jurisdictions which collect zakat on your behalf, right, in the world, if they will have a very clear allocation and say, look, this is your zakat being deducted and taken from you. But if you're in a jurisdiction where zakat is not collected at all, then tax is not the same as zakat. Allah has very clearly specified the recipients of zakat in Surah Tawbah, verse 60, where Allah mentions إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا till the end of the verse. Allah mentions the categories of zakat very clearly. And the categories have conditions and requirements. Zakat can't be used for everybody and anybody. Zakat is focused on supporting those at the, you could say, at a certain point in their life, economic life, right? Zakat is there like a baseline. It doesn't allow anybody to drop below that baseline. There shouldn't be a single person in a your area that you live in, a single Muslim who goes without food, a single Muslim who goes without shelter. And that's what zakat does. Zakat is this kind of catch. It catches people, it doesn't allow people to fall below this certain threshold. So it's very powerful. Now, if tax is being collected, but tax is being used for so many things, for so many um, public services. So zakat and tax are two different things completely. In fact, many sometimes tax is also used for other reasons, not even to do with welfare. If you look at the budget, the way the budget is designed, not all of it is for welfare. So zakat and tax are completely two different things. There is no promise from the collectors of tax that we will spend your zakat in a zakat eligible way. There is no
Yeah,
promise oversight. So the two are completely different, and that's why we have to make sure we pay our zakat correctly and to the right places.
perfect. And Mufti Faraz, when we talk about zakat, what comes to our mind is the wealth that we have or the money that we own, as opposed to how much we're earning in a specific year. And that is my early understanding of the difference between the two. And that puts me like in a position to ask more. Why should I pay on my assets or my own property, even though I've paid on that before and the year before, rather than just pay on what is added in a specific year? What's the philosophy behind it? What's the Islamic position or motivation behind that?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. So, look, zakat works on liquid assets which are really not factors of production. Think of it like that. So, anything which is a factor of production, there is no zakat on it. So, your land, your capital, your fixed assets that you have. When we say capital, classically, according to the economists, capital was not money. Only now we use the word capital to refer to money, but previously capital was referring to fixed assets like your machinery, your property, plant, equipment, and these things. You have land, you have labor and enterprise, right? These are the factors of production. There is no zakat on that. Zakat is on liquid things. Zakat is on the produce of factors of production. What's produced, there's zakat on that. And there's many like economic and philosophical things that we can think of. Why is the case? Because the factors of production are actually adding value to the economy. They're contributing, they're producing. But these things are hoarded and stacked. Your cash, you're holding it. Your assets, if they're not selling, you're keeping them, right? You want to sell them, but they're not selling, they're static there. These things are static. So even their contribution to the economy is done through zakat. Now, why, coming to your question, why do we pay every single year? And zakat does not work on a revenue basis. Zakat doesn't work on your revenue and income, how much you've earned. Rather, zakat works on what you have at your year end. Because every single year is a new year, right? Every single year, it's like you reset. Just like you're not responsible to pay zakat on money that you had 6 months ago and it was sold, right? You're not responsible for that. It's whatever you have now with you at the year end. As long as it's equal to threshold or above the threshold, you have to pay zakat. So it's like a snapshot on your year end. That's all.
All right, all right. And if we want to have a simple perspective on how we go about calculating zakat, we talked about the time of year, we talked about the philosophy behind it, we talk about why it's based on wealth as opposed to income. But how do we calculate it in a easy to do way, something that doesn't require a lot of complication, because the last thing we want to have is a complicated way of calculating it.
Yeah, I mean, look, the simplest way is just use a calculator online. There's many zakat calculators online. Just fill out the numbers. Honestly, just go work through it. But in a very easy way, you just add your cash, your gold, your silver, your stock, your currencies that you have, your investments, the values, right? Depending on what the investment is, and then you pay 2.5%. I know people who want to make it very simple. They just pay 2.5% on everything, right?
Yeah,
Some people don't even calculate, they just estimate and think, perhaps I've got £5,000 of zakat to pay, I'll pay £5,000, right?
yeah,
That
yeah.
can work if you're covering your liability, right? With certainty your liability is being covered. But for the most part, many people will not do that, and that's why calculation is important.
Of course, of course. No, definitely. And some people actually look at it also from a how much time has this money been in your account, and they go back to 1 year before. Do you think this kind of calculation as well is fine? People are okay with not looking just at the current balance, but even looking at maybe the lowest balance during the year, because this is what has been there for at least 1 year?
Yeah, so this is another view. There are different views in the fiqh. One view is that you just take a snapshot approach to how much you have on your year end. There's another view in the fiqh which says that you look at the lowest balance that you've held across the entire year. So you disregard the fluctuations, but whatever the lowest point in the year, you take that and then you pay zakat on that, because that it means with certainty that's the amount you've held across the year. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
how much you pay zakat on. So that's also a view.
So this is also a well accepted view, you believe?
Yeah, it's definitely a view of, and it's the Shafi'i scholars and Shafi'i school which practice upon this now. As far as I'm aware, in Malaysia, this is the standard practice when it comes to working out their zakat. So, if you adhere to that understanding, you're more than welcome. What I generally advise people is, because zakat is an ibadah, it's a worship. Always, whatever you've learned, whatever views you take to work out for your salah, for your zakah, for your hajj, this is your ibadah, it's your personal activity, and it's your personal worship. You want to make sure it's correct. Always check up, what you've learned from your teachers and do accordingly.
Great, thank you so much. Maybe we're gonna make it a bit more complicated for you and for the viewers, but we will have to go into just into a high level description of what is private markets in general, and the Sharia compliant investments that are related to it. And we can share here a slide on the matter quickly. In general, the investment universe, we can separate it into three main verticals: investments that are considered growth drivers, investments that are income generators, and inflation hedges. When we invest in growth drivers, we're investing to build our wealth over time. Whereas for income generators, we're investing to generate return. Inflation hedges help us in maintaining the real value of what we own against inflation. We can invest in growth drivers in several ways that are Sharia compliant, mainly equities, whether private or public. For income generators, we also have a wide spectrum of potential investments. We've heard about sukuk, and we know them to a certain extent. Leasing funds, trade finance, lending. Also, inflation hedges. Real estate is the elephant in the room, of course, and of course, owning commodities in real commodities, physical commodities, or investing in funds that do investing in commodities. So we're gonna go about talking about each type of investment, Mufti Faraz, and look at it from a Islamic lens, from a zakat lens, to help the participants as well relate to what they invest in and how to calculate investment on that. So on the first item of the Sharia compliant private investment is private equity. And just in simple terms, private equity could be you owning your company, which you own 100% of it and you operate it on a daily basis, or you own a share in the company that someone else is managing, a 30%, a 40%, even more than 50, but still you're away from operations, or you are investing in a fund that does that as a strategy. They go find investments in companies and they invest in those companies, and then they flip them for return. So with that in mind, Mufti Faraz, how would one look at his investment in private equity, whether direct or through funds, and calculate zakat on it?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and it's something which is becoming more popular now, because private investments have increased over the last decade, right, significantly, and it's become much more accessible to people. So, and that's what Manara is doing. Manara is making it even more accessible to people, right? So
Yeah.
these kind of questions are being received more and more. Look, as a principle, once you're a shareholder of a company, you are now a shareholder. You have an interest in the underlying business. So if it's one company, you have a shareholding in that company. You would be responsible to pay zakat on the net zakatable assets in the company. right? So you need to work out and find out from the founders, the directors, what's the kind of like last financial statement. You can take that, or if they have some internal records, and you determine what's the percentage of cash, what's the stock and inventory like, what are the receivables due, right? When you're working out zakat on private investments and companies, you need to look at typically the current assets or the zakatable assets. The fixed assets or non-current assets, such as your property, plant, equipment, your intangibles, these are not zakatable, right? They're not zakatable at all. It's generally your current assets. So you work out what's the percentage of current assets, what's the value of that, and then you work out what's the zakatable assets ratio to total assets. So just say it's 20% as an example. You would apply that 20% to your shareholding. I own £1,000 worth of shares. I apply 20% to my shareholding, and I will pay zakat on 20% of my £1,000. So it'll be 2.5% of £200, which is £5. That's a very simple example, but the principle is the same, that you look at the underlying zakatable assets. Yes, the challenge is how much information can you receive? That's where the challenge comes, right? And that's where, depending on where you're investing, with whom you're investing, access to information can sometimes be challenging, or updated real time information can sometimes be challenging. And that's where potentially do some estimation and use some proxies to work out zakat in a most accurate manner.
Yeah, yeah. And two questions come to mind, Mufti, when we talk about such kind of investments. Going through funds, where fund managers are investing in other companies, minority stakes, whether in a Series A or Series B, or even mature companies that they're buying them out. How would you estimate the overall zakat amount or the exposure that you have in such a situation?
Yeah, now this is where it gets extremely tricky, because many a time you're investing in 30, 40 companies. You could have 50 companies, right? You can have many companies in a fund. I know one fund that we were advising, they had 200 companies in their portfolio, right? And that's normal. You can have so many companies in a particular fund and portfolio, depending on the size of the company. And when you invest in startups, right, or these early stage companies, you might even put in 10,000 here, 5,000 there, 20,000 here, 30,000 there. So there's a lot of funds being trickled into many different companies. Now, what you do need, really, what you need to do is get the data from them. That is the most kind of like accurate way nowadays with I would say, the technology that we have at our disposal. And I know this because I've done this exercise with one of our clients that we advise. They did this. They got all the data from all the companies in the fund, right? It takes about a month to do so, but it's something that you need to do as a fund. You have that responsibility. So you just work out and you get the data. What are the like ratio of current assets to total assets per company,
Yeah.
and then you just aggregate that together. Then that will give you a proxy of some sort, right? Any company
Yeah.
which you don't know, then you can. What happens is over time you can create a proxy as well. But the thing is with a proxy, you can't apply. For example, I can't look at publicly listed companies and apply that proxy to growth and venture, because they're completely different, right? The way the
Yeah.
things work. So you have to get a proxy from the same sector, the same kind of start where they are in the kind of business cycle, even the industry that they're working in potentially, because as you know, certain sectors are cash heavy and asset light, right? They have a lot of cash,
Right.
cash rich, asset light, like your service sector. Whereas others like machinery and these types of companies where it's more kind of a labor intensive and machinery intensive, fixed capital intensive. Perhaps up there you have more capital, fixed capital or assets, and less cash, depending, and even the financing. Certain companies have more access to financing, and they leverage a lot potentially. So all
Of
these are
course.
different considerations when working out zakat. So you see, when working out zakat, you're not only looking at the Sharia compliance, But there's so many factors to think of as well, in
Mm.
addition to Sharia compliance, which need to be factored into a calculation.
No, of course, of course. Thanks for that. And I guess when we talk about income generating investments that are Sharia compliant, the spectrum is very wide, from sukuks to trade finance to leasing to lending. If we start with talking about sukuk, whether public sukuks or private sukuks, and we know for a fact that sukuks are structured differently for different issuers and also invested into for different as well intentions. Some hold it for trading, others they hold them for income for the long term. How would you suggest one would look at his sukuk portfolio and calculate its zakat?
Yeah. So look, sukuk, they come in all sizes, as you mentioned. Ijara sukuk is a very common instrument that's used. The ijara sukuk. Ijara is just like a sukuk based on a lease, and in that one you don't have to worry. All you have to pay zakat on is the dividend or the rental income that's given. That's all. There's many hybrid instruments now in the market where you have like 51% ijara, 49% murabaha. They do this hybrid element so that the sukuk is tradable. Because if you have murabaha, which is over 50%, then the receivables, or it becomes um, it becomes something which is illiquid. You can't trade it anymore. That's why, from a Sharia compliance perspective, that's why typically hybrid instruments have more ijara or wakala and less murabaha in a hybrid structure. So, of course, if it's a murabaha sukuk, you have to pay on the entire holdings of a murabaha because it's receivables that are owed to you from a sale.
Yeah.
So these are, I would say, the main kind of sukuk in the market. If it's murabaha, you have to pay on everything. Ijara, you just pay on the rental income that's due.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we talk, Mufti, about other than sukuks, also income generators, we can look as well at equipment leasing, which is a Sharia compliant strategy, rather than we go and finance a factory or a producer. We actually buy his equipment and we lease it to him for a specific rental income, and whether we do it ourselves, we do it to a friend of ours, or we do it through a fund manager who does that as a strategy, it all boils down to the same strategy. How do you suggest looking at these kind of investments?
Yeah. So look, leasing can be structured in two ways. Either the goal is like a financial lease, a Sharia compliant one, where you want to eventually transfer the asset to the customer,
Yeah.
right? Or you're just leasing it and it's only a lease. It's more like an operational lease and not a financial lease in that manner. If it's the former, where the idea is to on sell potentially or gift the item. If you're selling it on, now this is quite tricky because yes, you've bought to sell something with it. So if your intention is to resell it, even if it's a nominal value, you'll pay zakat on the entire value of that particular item right now. And
Yeah.
any cash that you have with you, zakat will be due on that also. However, if the intention is that you're not going to sell this anymore, rather it's lease, and in the future one day you'll gift it to the
Yeah.
customer. Because in Sharia we have both structures. You have the al-ijara thum al-bay structure, where you lease then sell, and you have the
Mm.
al-ijara al-muntahiya bit-tamlik, which is you lease and then you
Mm.
transfer ownership through gift. If it's the gifting scenario, you only have to pay zakat on the cash that you've received as dividends, not on the entire asset value.
Of course. And Mufti, trade finance, which is gaining a lot in traction, and people are looking at it as a very solid investment strategy, especially nowadays with the cost of funding increasing. It's simply when we go after or we go and finance a trader, a commodity trader who's buying from mines and from other sources and selling to other buyers, whether the downstream or upstream, regardless what the reason is, they sell them with a payment term. And we have this opportunity to go in partnership with traders and extend to them that investment or facility for them to acquire or purchase the raw material and sell it to whoever needs it. And this is a strategy that provides liquidity for investors because they can at any point in time not renew those facility and take their investment back in cash. In that sense, what are we looking at here, Mufti? Are we talking about a trading or refinancing? What are we in this position, and what kind of zakat we would need to levy on that kind of investment?
Yeah, I mean, if it's structured as a musharaka type structure here, where you are partnering, buying a share in the trade assets and then on selling them, and thereby that's the capital that you're providing in the financing. So this joint venture type structure, zakat would be due on your share because you bought that to on sell and do a profit share.
Yeah. All right. And so effectively, and if we're actually extending financing in the process rather than doing a musharaka, or maybe owning those commodities in the interim until they're sold and we get our money back, would we consider this as if we're owning current assets, or it's something different?
Yeah, if we are owning the asset and the idea is to it's based on financing, it just depends on the structure. We're owning, and it's like a sale and lease back potentially. That can be a structure, right? Or is it that you are doing like a murabaha transaction where you're buying and on selling? So they identify an asset and then you're selling that on with a markup to the customer. Just depending on the structure that we use, the zakat treatment will be different. So it's not really about the form of where it is, whether it's growth, income generating, or inflation hedging. Zakat has another layer, that is, what's the intention behind the transaction? Are you buying to resell? Is it, and what are you expected to receive in return? These are some of the considerations that you have to take into account when looking at the zakat question.
Very clear. Mufti, when we talk about lending, going after someone and extending to him a murabaha facility so that he can have access to funds, and whether it's in a business or maybe to pay off some debt that he has, or for whatever other reason, how do we look at that kind of investment?
Yeah, so if it's like a commodity murabaha tawarruk transaction, then zakat is due upon the full payment that's due to you. So if you're the investor or the funder, the financer, up here in this scenario, because you've given finance and you are expecting your capital plus your profit, right? Your principal plus profit, whatever's outstanding, you'll pay zakat on the full balance.
All right, clear. And I guess last but not least, which is one of the major strategies that people invest in, and real estate also has its own different types of investment. Some invest in real estate as their homes, their first home, maybe a second home, a vacation home, or even they invest in an apartment, they lease it out, or even they own several properties with an intention to sell them down eventually for a gain. How do we go about looking at each type of investment strategy in real estate and calculating its zakat?
Yeah, so like a buy to let, where you just buy and you're leasing as a passive income, potentially a second home that you have. There is no zakat due on the property value. Rather, zakat is payable on the cash that you own on your zakat year end. That's what zakat is due on. So the rental income that you've received, whatever's left from there on your zakat year end, you pay zakat on that, based on the view of zakat on year end. If it's a property which you've bought as a hedge potentially, and you just as a store of value now, and one day in the future, if you need to, you'll liquidate and sell that property. But for now, you're owning it. The idea is a long-term investment from that sense. Then again, zakat is not due because it's not on the market. You're not selling it right now. It's purely a form of storing your wealth in a different form, and that form is not zakatable. It's not, you're not holding it in cash, rather it's in property. That's absolutely fine, and there's no zakat on that either.
And the second home where we are utilizing such property, but not on a daily basis. Does that have a special treatment?
Yeah, very good question. So if you have a second home which you use, so when you have your personal assets, there is no zakat on personal assets. So whether it's your first home, second home, third home, fourth home, there is no zakat whatsoever. Likewise, if you have 5 cars and you're only using one car, uh, there is no zakat due on the other cars. But where does this have an impact? This extra surplus assets have an impact if Allah protect us, if you ever needed to receive zakat, right? You just see something happened and you were in a position where you wanted to take zakat, then you would not be able to take zakat until you liquidate these assets and then you see your value. Where are you? So when it comes to receiving zakat and you have surplus assets which you don't use at all in the year, there's purely surplus, then those assets must be liquidated first in order to receive zakat. They'll be valued into your net worth, basically.
Understood. And the type of real estate investments which some are familiar with which is REITs, real estate investment trust. These look like any share you buy for a listed company, but it is effectively a fund of several real estate investments managed by a third party, a manager, but the unit ownership is traded and is listed on exchange. Uh, how do we look at those kind of investments, although they are in the public space, which is outside our discussion today? But this is a point that's always raised from our perspective.
Yeah, so look, there's different types of REITs. If it's a Sharia compliant REIT, so it's not going to be a mortgage based REIT or any of that nature, then from a Sharia perspective and from a Zakat perspective, it'll be based on leasing. So the principles of leasing apply. Yes, if you buy this unit uh, or the share with the intention just to resell for quick, to capture some kind of price fluctuation, some quick profit to make, then zakat will be due on the full amount because you are just buying and selling this particular share with only the goal of trading it. However, if it's a long-term investment in the REIT, your intention is not to resell, rather to hold for dividend income purposes or as a long-term hedge, then zakat is not due on the full investment value. Rather, zakat is due upon the rental income that you receive, the dividends that you receive only.
Of course, thank you. And Mufti Faraz, the last item here in the private investment is commodities. But the way we look at it, it can be even gold, silver, as you mentioned earlier. And more nowadays, people are looking that as a safe haven to keep their money under the mattress, as we discussed in our last webinar. Uh, how do we look at it? Are we really looking at holding our investment in commodities? Would that saves zakat? Would that save some zakat, or it is considered as a money equivalent?
Yeah, so if it's gold or silver, then it's money equivalent. You have to pay zakat on it. If you buy platinum or something else, right, some other commodity, some other precious metal besides gold and silver, then zakat is not due upon that. So any other stone, something that's has some kind of value, then zakat is not due on that. Only gold and silver zakat will be due on. Yeah, if you're trading these, if you're trading, just say you bought diamonds and you buy to resell with a profit, then that will be again a trade asset and zakat will be due upon that on its listed price. But if you bought diamonds just as a store of wealth and to diversify your portfolio and your investments, and you're holding that, then there's no intention to resell right now. There's no zakat due upon the diamonds.
No, clear. And why is this difference between silver and gold and the rest of commodities?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and this actually goes back to the philosophy of what money is in Sharia. Gold and silver are what the scholars and the fiqh calls athman khilqatan, that they are naturally money. Gold and silver possess what's known as moneyness in English. They have all the monetary elements. Everything that's good for money, gold possesses. It's storable, it's retrievable, it's divisible, it's portable, it's durable, right? is scarce, the kind of like effort that goes into creating gold is very difficult. So the supply of gold in the markets will not be, the supply will be limited, right? So all these elements which are from a Sharia perspective desirable for money to hold, gold has those properties. That's why it's always recognized as a form of money. It's always, and it's not. It's amazing that we naturally go run towards gold, right? Whenever we're thinking of trying to preserve value and we're scared of inflation or anything, you start looking at gold markets and look what's happening there. So people see this as a safe haven, right, of as an asset. So, and that's what the Sharia has told us from day one. Sharia said, look, this is your natural form of money, and it's still to this day people go to it despite not having a gold standard. We still go to gold.
No, it's a great point. I believe, based on what we heard today from you, Mufti Faraz, it's really take decision whether you invest in a specific type of investment or another, without understanding the zakat implication, may not put you in a position to eventually say I went with the right investment strategy, because some investment products that are offered to you or that you invest in might have a big zakat implication, like a 2.5 on the whole amount, whether principal of or return, and you compare it to another investment that is only where zakat is only applied on return, and you think that the first is a better investment, where actually after zakat you might end up with lower return in your pocket. So this, from my perspective as an investment professional, makes a lot of sense to understand early on, before you actually do the investment, as opposed to actually waiting until the end of the year and saying, this is actually my zakat. You would have invested additional amounts somewhere else if you were to know before. We have a couple of questions from some of the participants. So platinum and radium, Mufti Faraz, are they the same, or they're considered a different type of commodity?
Yeah, look, they're different in a sense for zakat purposes. There's no zakat due upon them, right? They just like any other metal or other element. There's no zakat on it at all. Zakat is only identified for gold and silver from the precious metals. Of course, if you're trading platinum and radium, then zakat will be due upon them. That's your trade and your business. That's not because it's platinum and radium, rather because it's trade assets. That's why zakat is due on that.
Of course. I guess we had our 40 minutes well spent on all the matters that we wanted to discuss with our participants. I'll leave it to you for Mufti Faraz to tell us as a concluding statement, especially in this holy month of Ramadan, whether it's around zakat or in general as a perspective to money. It would be good to have your view in general, what would be our intentions during this month as to our investments and our strategies in that sense.
Yeah, no, sure. Jazakallah khair. It was a pleasure and privilege to be with you on this wonderful, honestly, 40 minutes of like a really good, insightful exchange. This is hardly spoken of. So, it's very good that Manara is creating awareness in this space as well, especially in the zakat space. And that's what I'd like to just end off with. That it's so important. We all pay zakat in this month, or majority of us pay zakat in this month. Make it a conscious act of ibadah and worship. Be conscious while you're paying your zakah that this is an ibadah that you're doing, because we're so used to making card payments, right? We're so used to making payments. It's just another mundane activity for us. You just go on a website. Even the websites look like a shopping cart, right? You do check out, you put in your money, what you're sponsoring, what you're supporting, where you're paying your zakat, and it's done. From a customer from a UX and a UI, the user experience, user interface, it feels like you're shopping in any other store. But from a spiritual interface, right, and spiritual experience, it's something completely different. This is an ibadah. So you stop when you first paying your zakah. You ask Allah that oh Allah, accept this from me, give me, guide me, make me do it correctly. When you're calculating your zakah, do it properly. When it comes, you're on the website, when you're putting in the payment, be very conscious of Allah. Be very conscious. Have your heart and mind focus on Allah. When you make the payment, you turn to Allah and istighfar and seek forgiveness from Allah for any shortcomings in your zakah. So it's very important you stop to do this when you're paying zakah, and it's not, don't make it like any other payment, because in the past people would actually go out to look for people. Zakat payers would go out to look for zakat recipients, and you'd feel it when you're giving to somebody. You see them in need, you'd feel what it means to be on the receiving end. You have empathy within you. You feel for the other person. Today we don't see any of that. It's become purely a payment, and that's a sad. There's a sad element to this for us, because we're missing out on the spirit of zakat. We're losing the empathy. We're losing the feelings for people, and the gratefulness that we should have for the blessings that we have is also somewhat not there. So be very conscious when you're paying zakat. Why you're doing it, who you're doing it for, and thank Allah for giving you the wealth that He's given you. So just have that conversation with Allah whilst paying zakah. That's I would say, the most important thing when you're working on your zakah.
Great words. Thank you so much. Very, very beautiful. And we definitely take those in mind, inshallah, during the month of Ramadan, once we get over with our calculation first and start paying it off. Thank you so much, Mufti Faraz, for the time, and thank you everyone for joining us on this call. Ramadan Mubarak. Assalamu alaikum.